So let's talk a little about investments. This past Friday on Jim Cramer's show Mad Money, he gave some really bad advice.
Regular viewers here know my rules. No matter who you are, the first $10,000 you invest in the market should go straight into a low-cost index fund or ETF that mirrors the S&P 500.
According to the article, Cramer said, and I quote, "No one under the age of 30 should ever own bonds. That is just a fool's game. In your 30s, however," he advised, "up to 10% of your portfolio can be invested in bonds. By the time you're ready to retire, 40 to 50% is appropriate." Before I explain why this is bad advice for most of you out there, let's do a little comparison between Jim Cramer and most people. So I'm guessing Jim Cramer has at least $10 million saved up somewhere. So how does that compare to somebody who has, let's say, $10,000 or $50,000 or maybe even $100,000 saved up? Well, for Jim Cramer, if he has $10 million invested, when the stock market dropped 55% back in 2008, he lost $5.5 million. Sounds terrible, doesn't it? But he still had $4.5 million left. So if he decided he wanted to put new Tesla tile roof on his mansion and maybe that cost him $100 or $200,000, he still got 4.4 or 4.3 million left. Not so bad, is it? But if you've got a $10,000 investment and you lose $5,500 of it, now you're left with $4,500. And oh, by the way, for you, life has real consequences. So let's say your car needs a new air conditioner. Boop, $2,500 out the window. So now you take your $4,500, and by the way, that always happens at the worst time. So now you take your $4,500 and you spend $2,500 of it on your new air conditioner. What do you have left? Not much. $2,000. So now you've gone from $10,000 to $2,000. So let's look at Jim Cramer's advice in another way and why it's bad. Past performance is no indication of future performance. Please pause this video and read the disclaimer above. If we take his advice and put 100% of our first 10 grand in the S&P 500, in 2008, you would have lost $5,500 of it. So you got 100% of the return of the S&P, which over the last 24 years or so has been 9.3%. But you would have also got 100% of the maximum drawdown, which in 2008, 2009 was minus 55.19%. Now, Jim Cramer's saying that a young person shouldn't hold any bonds or at most 10% bonds, but let's take a look at the folly in that. By the way, remember to go back and take a look at my video, the number one question you should answer before you invest, because I think that's a better way to look at your investments than to just decide to throw it all in the S&P 500. So let's take somebody, for example, who by Jim Cramer's definition was insanely conservative, and they had 40% in the S&P 500 and 60% in bonds. They would have gotten almost 80% of the return, but only 37% of the loss. This is a much more palatable situation, I think, for most people who don't have millions in the bank. Now, there is one piece of advice that I do agree with when it comes to Jim Cramer. He says take a very small amount of your portfolio and invest it in some rocket ships, basically, some companies that you think are going to do really well. So let's take a look at how that might have played out. So now again, when I compare to 100% in the S&P 500, which had a 9.3% return and a minus 55.19% loss, let's look at one where we put 33% of our money in the S&P 500 and we put 60% in bonds and we put 7% in a rocket ship portfolio. So we invest in Apple, we invest in Facebook, we invest in things we think are going to go through the roof, Nvidia, Tesla, whatever, right? So now that more conservative portfolio has an 8.55% return. So we're getting 92% of the return of the S&P 500, but it has a minus 27.93% drawdown. So we're only getting 51% of the loss of the S&P 500. I think that's a portfolio that most young people could live with. But again, You have to decide for yourself. You might say, hey, Calvin, I don't want to lose 30% of my money, man. $3,000 out of 10, that's a lot of money for me. So then, be more conservative. Go to 80% bonds and only get 25% of the loss of the S&P 500. You'll still be way better off, and you're getting 80% of the return. So not a bad situation for you. Remember, when you're investing your hard-earned money, the decisions you make about how you allocate have real consequences. Life happens. You need that money at the worst time sometimes, and you don't want to put yourself in that position. So decide how much money you can afford to lose and allocate yourself accordingly. Thank you for watching today, and if you like this video, please click on the subscribe button below, and I've left links below for the CNBC video from Jim Cramer's Mad Money recap from this past Friday, June 30th, 2017, and I've also left a link to the article about that video. That's all for now.
Who's that down the street? Yeah, look, that's her. I think I'm gonna go out the back way. Yeah, I'll see y'all later. No, I ain't going out there.